5 men stepped into the freezing cold air. What happened high in the Sierra Nevada mountains that night has stayed with me. Ted was found lying in the cot, blankets pulled to his chest like someone had tucked him in. There was food in the trailer, and he had been alive long enough to understand what was happening. Gary had made it there too. His boots were still on the floor. And at some point, he stood up, opened the door, and walked back out into the snow without them. And that wasn't an accident. For decades, the Yuba County Five has been told as a story about 5 men who got lost in the mountains. But getting lost doesn't explain dying inside shelter, and it doesn't explain walking away from it. A few hours earlier, they were sitting in the stands at Chico State. Jack had driven. It was his car, and he liked knowing the route. Ted was already thinking about the tournament in the morning. They had been talking about it all week. They stayed until the final buzzer, walked out with the crowd into the cold parking lot air. Before heading home, they stopped at a convenience store just before closing, grabbed some soda, candy bars, snacks for the drive. The clerk would later say nothing about them stood out. They paid and got back in the car. It was late. Home was a little over an hour north. They had made the drive before. Missing the turn wouldn't have felt dramatic at first. Highways bend, side roads branch off. If you're talking, it's easy to take a wrong turn or miss a sign. It would have felt just like another road. But then it narrowed. The air sharpened as the elevation climbed. Tree lines thickened. Lights thinned out. And at some point, someone in that car had to realize they weren't headed home. Bill wasn't loud, but he noticed things. Details most people would overlook. And still, they kept going. By the time the car stopped, they were nearly 70 miles in the wrong direction. The engine was still running, heat pushing into the cabin while the windshield slowly clouded at the edges. Empty wrappers and soda cans on the floorboards. Just the sound of the motor idling. Someone leaned forward to see past the headlights. Another shifted in their seat. Then the driver's door opened, and cold air rushed in so fast it cut through the warmth. One of them stepped out, then another. The engine shut off, and the car, still holding the warmth of a drive that should have ended at home, went quiet. Snow started to build around the tires, the wind brushing across the road and leaving the rest of the mountain untouched. A forest ranger driving patrol through the Plumas National Forest noticed the car because it didn't belong there. It was a turquoise 1970 Mercury Montego. He ran the plate. It came back to Jack Madruga. He stepped out and walked around the car, taking in the details. The doors were unlocked. Inside, the air was cold and still. The keys were in the ignition. Outside, the snow showed 5 sets of tracks leading away from the car in the same direction, moving up the road before thinning out. Search teams were called in that afternoon. They spread along the road first, then into the trees, following what remained of the footprints until the trail broke apart into the white. By nightfall, they had found nothing. Searches slowed as the snow deepened, then stopped altogether when the storms came through. For months, the mountain held what it had taken. It wasn't until spring, when the thaw began to soften the forest floor, that the first body was found. Jack Madruga, and he wasn't far from the road. And Bill Sterling was nearby. They hadn't made it very far at all, and farther into the trees, searchers found Jackie Hewitt. He had gone deeper. Then, nearly 20 miles from where the car had been left, they found the Forest Service trailer, and inside it, Ted. When searchers stepped inside, the air was stale and cold. Ted was lying in a cot, beard grown in. He had lost a significant amount of weight. It was clear he hadn't died quickly. Blankets had been wrapped around him carefully. There were military rations in the cabinets, a propane heating system, matches, most of it unused. Investigators determined that Ted had survived there for weeks. He hadn't frozen to death. He had starved. Gary had made it to the trailer too, and he had been in the Army. When he was steady, people described him as capable. He worked, lived on his own, took care of himself. But he also lived with schizophrenia, and there were stretches when things slipped, especially if he wasn't taking his medication. For some amount of time, the two of them were there together while the snow built outside. Shelter, food, warmth. Ted getting weaker. Gary would have been the stronger one. And at some point, Gary stepped back out into the freezing mountains, boots left on the floor. No one knows how long he walked. No one knows how far he made it. He was never found. Over time, the story settled into something simple. 5 men got lost in the mountains. Winter did the rest. But inside the car and trailer, there were things that should have made dying almost impossible. And yet, 4 of them were eventually brought down from the mountain. One of them never was. And somewhere beyond that road, beyond the search lines, the white pines closed in and kept the rest, except the boots on the floor.